to public them on this.
Mine is right at 6. All right, that's 1, 2,
Oh, you can change it.
5.
Yeah.
All right.
But IT should do it. I won't let you.
No, I don't have the administrator password.
Good afternoon. This is a meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission. It is 6 o'clock. Today is September the 5th of 2019. Can we have a roll call, please?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Erasmo Villarreal,
Present.
Cortez,
Present.
Carlos Flores. Present. George Beckelheimer,
Present.
Rubén Ugalde,
Present.
Johnny Narvaez,
Present.
Abraham Lugo,
Present.
Jose Villarreal, Jose Dominguez. For the record, Mr. Chairman, you do have quorum.
Thank you. I know that Commissioner Dominguez was going to be in San Antonio for some business, and Commissioner Joe Villarreal just called me that he had one of his employees got injured at work, to please excuse him. So can I have a motion to excuse him both? We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
And a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Can everybody please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, the next item we have is consideration of the minutes of July the 18th and of August the 1st. I don't know if you all had a chance to review the minutes, and if you haven't, we can give you a few minutes to review.
I have one mention for the July 18. I'm shown as absent on the archive videos. I'm present.
All right, we'll have that correction done.
Which was
July 18th meeting.
And also Jose
That
Luis
might be-
Villarreal is listed as present for the 18th. I believe he's not.
That is correct.
He's
I
not.
believe there's also a typo, Carlos Flores' absences on the 18th, not excused. What is this about?
That may be true.
Commissioner Ugalde insisted that we,
For the record, I will remember this.
All right, you guys had a chance to finish going over the minutes?
yes?
Then we can entertain a motion for approval of both meetings.
I move that we approve the minutes with the corrections that were noted by Commissioner Lugo.
Yes.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
And a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Thank you. The next item that we have is review and reconsideration of Los Presidentes East Master Plan. The intent is residential and commercial, and the purpose of the revision is to realign streets. The action is proposed approval, subject to the following comments from planning, from traffic, water utilities, and a notice to developer. Howland Engineering. Nobody's here representing Howland, okay? All right, what are the wishes of the commission on this?
Make a motion to approve, subject to the comments.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. The next item that we have is review and reconsideration of the Pinnacle Industrial Center Master Plan. The intent is light industrial. The purpose of the revision is to incorporate additional acreage. The proposed action is approved, subject to the following comments from planning, from water utilities, and from traffic safety, and a notice to developer.
Good evening, Commissioners. Judd Gilpin for the record, representing Pinnacle Industrial Center. We concur with staff comments.
Very good. Any questions for the engineer? All right, what are the wishes of the commission?
Motion to approve, subject to the following comments.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you.
I abstain, Mr. Chairman.
You abstain? I'm sorry. We have one abstention. Commissioner Beckelheim. All right. The next item, item 7A, I do have before me an email where they've asked to table this, time uncertain. Can we have a motion?
Motion to table, time uncertain. Second.
Motion to second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries, thank you. The next item that we have is item 7B.
Yes.
Yes. This is a request, preliminary consideration of the Rodolfo Sepulveda plat. The intent is commercial. The proposed action is approved subject to the following comments from planning, from engineering, from fire, and a notice to developer. Tech engineering, I don't see him here. All right,
I move that we approve item 7B with the, subject to the attached comments.
we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
And a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries. The next item, item 7C, preliminary consideration of the 5M Realty Pinto Valle plat. The intent is industrial. The proposed action is approved subject to the following comments from planning, from engineering, from water and utilities, and a notice to developer. The engineer is Mr. Castillo.
I'm Realty and Pegua Consulting, and we concur with the comments.
Very good. Any questions for the engineer? All right, what are your wishes?
Move that we approve item 7C, subject to the attached comments.
Motion, do we have a second?
Second.
And a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. The next item is item 7D. Preliminary consideration of the plat of Pinnacle Industrial Center Subdivision Unit 10, the intent is light industrial. Proposed action is approved subject to the following comments from planning, from engineering, water utilities, and a notice to developer.
Again, Jed Gilpin for the record, representing Pinnacle Industry Center. We concur with staff comments.
Okay, thank you. All right, what are the wishes of the commission?
Motion to approve item 7D, subject to the following comments.
We have a motion, do we have a second? Second. And a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries, thank you.
One abstention.
One abstention. Motion by O'Hara. The next item is final consideration of the plat of Cuatro Vientos.
Make a motion.
Hold on, final,
Make a motion to hear items 8A, B, C, and 9A.
Is there anybody here that
As
needs
one
to
item.
abstain?
No, all these are different.
here, 8A, 8B,
8C and 9A, all is one.
all right?
Second.
We have a motion and a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay,
Make a motion to approve those items.
Second.
we have a motion and a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries, thank you. All right, the next item that we have then is gonna be item 9A, 10A, I'm sorry. All right, this is, subject regarding the revision of the City of Laredo Land Development Code, Chapter 24, Article 4 and 5, the purpose of creating a specific use zoning overlay district for the Land Development Code to be entitled Reduced Setback Overlay Zone, RSO Zone, and may, and other matters incidental thereto. All right.
Commissioners, Kirby Snideman, Planning Director for the record. Also for the record, congratulations, Commissioner Tellez, on your beautiful baby boy.
That is not mine. I appreciate it. That's Councilman Bali's.
Yes, I said beautiful and I haven't even seen it yet, so.
I appreciate it.
You're sure about that, sir?
Yeah.
All right, well, some of this is going to be reviewed, but for the public record, I would like to, and for the public that may be watching, I would like to review where we're at.
All right.
This setback issue. We'll have a quick overview of setbacks. We'll review the comprehensive plan and what it recommends. Talk about the process we're going through now with Recode Laredo, where we're replacing the land development code. We'll talk about the impact of changing setbacks, why we need to be careful. And then we'll talk about option 1 that you've heard of, and then option 2, which I'm presenting today for your input, and that I'll take to council with your recommendation to include as part of the code. Okay, first of all, what are setbacks? As a review, I'm sure you're very familiar, but Setbacks are, it's a distance typically taken from the property line where structures can be located. So you can't build within a setback. Let's say if the setback is 10 feet from the property line, you measure 10 feet, and within that area, you cannot build. Why do we have setbacks? Well, they have been put in place for privacy. They've also been put in place for safety. In commercial areas, it's not unusual to see 0 setbacks where you built to the lot line. But commercial buildings are built to a much higher safety standard than are private residences. So typically, people separate private residences, and we've done that. Now, does that setback or that distance of separation have to be a lot? No, it doesn't. And generally, that's become the default. Is that how it has to be? No. So as staff, we're open to the idea of changing the setbacks. What does our comprehensive plan say? And why is this important? It's important because state law and best practices, best planning practices, require that our land use decisions not be arbitrary and capricious, that they follow a plan, and that they reflect public input, that they allow the public to have their input. What does the comprehensive plan say? The comprehensive plan calls for reduced setbacks, so increasing the buildable area on a lot, but only in targeted areas. Comprehensive plan says we should do that in our business districts, in specific business districts, or in a new part of town where the new subdivision is built to maybe a new standard, where all things are thought through, not just changing the setbacks on somewhere old. So the comp plan does not call for changes to the whole citywide. Now, the comp plan also does, in spirit, it calls for denser development and more efficient use of the land that we have. So I think the comp plan, as I read it and as I understand it, and we want to give the public, we want to give residents more creativity in how they utilize their land. And we, as staff, we recommend reducing the setbacks, but we want to do that methodically. We want to think through it, and we want to make sure that the public has input, that they are noticed, that they don't wake up Tuesday morning after council and wonder what just happened. So we're going through a process called Recode Laredo, where we're replacing the land development code. And this is one of the areas that we're looking at. So regardless of what we do, what this recommendation does, or what council does, we're going to review this over the next 18 months and possibly change it again. We would have rather waited to go through this process for this, but we understand that this issue has come up, and so we're dealing with it now. Now, just a reminder of what Recode Laredo is. Our comprehensive plan said your land development code is very out of date, and it's confusing, and it's contradictory. And if you have to ask staff what it means, and we go, let me see, then you know you've got bad code. And sometimes it's confusing even for us. So because of that reason, the recommendation from the comprehensive plan was that we replace it. We replace our land development code. We make it simpler, we make it fairer, and we update it for the 21st century. And so we did an RFQ, a request for qualifications for consultants who are qualified to help us, and we located one. A team of national experts and also a very strong local consultant. We hired them, and then we negotiated the contract of working with, because this is a very big thing. So it took some time to figure out, okay, here's your scope, what are we going to do, who's going to do what, how are we going to do it all. We felt very comfortable with it. And then we started moving forward. Starting next week, some of you all may have gotten invitations. Well, all of you should have gotten alerts that we're doing this. But starting next week, well, actually, no, let me take that back. We're going to come to a work session here because to meet with all of you together, we have to do it as a quorum. So, but starting next week, we're having meetings all next week with stakeholders, with engineers, architects, developers, home builders, with all the city departments that touch land development. And we're going to be discussing these things and getting their ideas and working through what works and what doesn't work and how can we fix this, how can we make it better. So this process of Recode Laredo has begun. Now, why does it take 18 months? Replacing the rules for development is no simple task. And land development in Laredo, as in many places in the United States, is a big industry. This is not an industry that you change things quickly on. We want to engage the people who build in the city, And we want to engage the people who purchase in homes and businesses so that they understand the rules. So it should take a while. I know sometimes people are frustrated with government. They think, oh, I don't like it, it takes too long. You don't want things to change overnight. You don't. You want to have a process where you think through it and you get public input. Very quickly, because we already went over these things, why is it important? The recommendation that came from the TRB, the Technical Review Board, was to change our setbacks. And many of these things were not addressed. All of these things were not analyzed. Some of it may be talked about, but no data was presented on how these things would be impacted. And they need to be. They need to be looked at if we're going to make this change. So although it's simple on one lot to say, hey, okay, Commissioner Ugali, you have your home, so you want to build closer to the backyard, to the fence. No big deal, right? Okay, for your one home, no big deal. But what about your entire neighborhood? Everybody's increasing their buildable area. What are the impacts to stormwater, to where utilities are run, to the parking regulation and the amount of parking it may move to the street because people have less land to park on their lot? How's that going to affect the overall zoning? What about visibility when somebody's turning a corner and somebody's built further to the lot line? Do we need to take a look at visibility requirements on our roads? What about height limitations? Okay, someone can build 5 feet to their backyard, but we didn't, what was coming for a citywide change didn't say anything about height restrictions. So are we okay with somebody building 35 feet within 5 feet of your backyard, within 5 feet of the property line? Is that okay? Maybe it is. We haven't looked at it. These things aren't roadblocks, but they are things that need to be considered. What about floodplain requirements? How are they affecting where we'll allow floodplain to build, where we can build in the floodplain? Right-of-way widths and requirements, easement locations, although easements would still have to be respected, sometimes it's not always known where they are, especially in our older neighborhoods. So somebody has to go look that information up. But if you just tell citizens, oh, now you can build within 5 feet, maybe they start building without looking at easements. So we need to be very careful, especially our older neighborhoods. And then building and fire code requirements. When you build within 10 feet of another building, the IBC, the International Building Code, requires higher standards of building materials, and in some cases, fire suppression. So if somebody has already built to the lot line, and now we're allowing you to build within 5 feet of the lot line, now you're within 10 feet. But the problem is, our review process does not allow the fire marshal to review single-family residential plants. We don't do that because we haven't had to. Do we need to change that process? Do we need to have the fire marshal review everything? All residential that within a certain, where they're taking advantage of these setbacks? Something we need to consider that we haven't yet. So what council asked us to do was to ask you to bring a recommendation on this first option, on across the board, changing the setbacks citywide. Now, one little point of information. If you make a citywide change, there is no requirement that you have to mail notices. You just have to notice in the newspaper. Now, how many of y'all read the notices in the newspaper? By show of hands. Wow. Okay. I'm impressed. I don't even read the newspaper. So, very, very well done. I get it all in one. But most people, I would say, don't. And so the vast majority of people, residents, have no idea this is coming. And all the residents I've spoken to have no idea that this is coming. They haven't heard anything about it. And that's because our noticing requirements, when we're noticing that when something's happening citywide, we're not required to send mail notices. Now, if we change the zoning on, let's say, 10 acres on the south side of Laredo, we actually do have to notice all the addresses within 200 feet by ordinance. So those people get notices, and oftentimes you see them come to the audience and they tell you what they're thinking. But you maybe haven't heard any public input because no one's been noticed. That's one of the challenges. So I presented this slide and the next slide to council and said that I would bring you option 2 and ask for your recommendation. And option 1, I explained, unanimous negative recommendation. Well, it was unanimous negative, and the 1 was to table it indefinitely. I explained, yes, look, if you want to make changes quick, you could do it this way. That's one of the benefits. You're changing the whole city at once and it's fast. But you didn't have any public involvement. You didn't know thorough analysis was completed of these changes. And we put the city at great risk of being arbitrary and capricious, and that means possible litigation. There are very strict requirements when we make land use changes, that we follow a plan and that we involve the public.
Mr. Stadman?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, may I just interject briefly? And I appreciate that you're moving at a nice clip, though you've, of course, you're covering everything we've visited about the probably 4 consecutive P&Z meetings, but,
And I'm doing that for the sake of the public who may be watching.
right, I figured that. We voted negatively, and your recommendation was negatively. So, but you're wording it in a way that if we approve it, it would be injurious, but we've already voted against it. I'm just,
Planning Commission did not vote against it, that you sent a negative recommendation for council to vote against it.
right.
I did not bring it to council to vote on yet. I brought it to them for a discussion. And I let them know that I would be bringing it to them to vote on after I properly noticed it in
But-
October.
But you don't even have, what I'm saying is that you're saying we shouldn't move it forward with a recommendation of approval, but it's not even on the agenda.
Option 1 you already have. We haven't gotten to option 2, which I do have some discussion on and some details on of the recommendation that I'd like you to send. So that's coming.
Is there an attachment that's supposed to be here that we don't have?
No. No, it'll be in the presentation. So option 2 is a reduced setback overlay zone. What is an overlay zone? An overlay zone lays on top of the zoning, and it applies to all the zoning that's underneath. Now, one reason it's good to use overlay zones is sometimes you want to make a change to all the zones, but you don't want to change all the zones. You don't want to change every single zone to be 5-foot setbacks. Instead, applying an overlay zone to a certain area would say, within this area, we're comfortable, after having reviewed this area and noticing the community, we're comfortable with decreasing setbacks here. But instead of having to create, let's say, underneath this overlay, there were 3 different zones, an R1, an R1A, and what's another residential zone? R2. An R2. So let's say there were 3 zones. Instead of now having to either change all those zones, which would change wherever those zones are in the city, or creating 3 new zones called R1A, RSO, R1, RSO, R2, RSO. Instead of having to, and then our code gets so complicated and convoluted, all we do is create one addition overlay zone called an RSO zone, and then we put that wherever we deem appropriate and where the public has been noticed and where they agree. So the benefit of creating an overlay zone in our code is that doing this will allow for public involvement, because all this does is give us now the option. Then if we were to apply an overlay zone to some particular part of the city, it would have to come back through Planning Commission. You would get to look at it and examine where we're putting it. The public would be noticed. They'd be sent out mails, anyone within 200 feet of that zone and inside of it. Then you would send a recommendation to City Council, and Council would make a vote on that specific area. Yes?
I guess clear up something for me. Are we talking about option number 2? Is that regarding to areas that are already zoned, or are we talking about new undeveloped land and as they come in?
It could be both. An overlay zone doesn't replace the underlying zone. All it does is put an additional layer above the zoning, so that wherever we apply this overlay, whether it be new land that's coming in or existing part of the city. But in either case, if we apply it, so this is 2 stages. One, we'd have to first create this in the ordinance, create that we can have a reduced setback overlay zone. Once that's been created, then we could apply it to certain parts of the city. And then it would have to go through this process of, let's say we do a neighborhood in South Laredo, and then we'd mail a notice to everybody in that in 200 feet around it. And then it would come to the Planning Commission, and you would get to examine it and send your recommendation to council. People would come here and give you their input, and then it would go to City Council, and they'd vote on whether or not to apply the RSO, the reduced setback overlay zone, to this area in South Laredo.
Well, I mean, I guess that I'm asking this is because I think we've all been pretty clear about we have no problems with new developments that are done by an engineer and they come with ideas that we want to reduce our setbacks, because I don't think anybody here has inherently said we're against 0 setbacks. We're against people because we deal with this, especially, for example, the next meeting we have, we're going to have a bunch of people wanting to change their zones. When you go into a neighborhood and you buy a house, knowing what the rules are when you buy that house, and then you want to change the rules because you found a good deal, and you didn't like the rules and now you want to change it from a B3 to a B4, even though there's plenty of B4s, and I'm using the zoning's classifications as an example, but that's one of the most common ones. Even though there's 1,000 properties for sale right now for B4s, every meeting we have is a bunch of people who buy B3s on the cheap, trying to upzone them to B4s, and we deal with this on a regular basis. And so why are we giving people who had every idea and knowledge of what they were buying, they paid what they paid for, if they didn't like it, if they wanted to go buy something that had a 0 setback, they can buy plenty of property available downtown. They can go buy some acreage outside of the city limits and buy it to their heart's content. But the problem I have is we do these things and then people don't show up, or neighbors, this rule that 200 feet, and don't know how it is because 200 feet with you under your directorship as compared to the prior one, it can be the front door or it can be all areas around. And we have neighbors coming around complaining that this property was changed, we didn't even know about it. Or we have other people saying, well, this property is zoned, got changed from an R1 to an R2, and it's not fair, why don't I get to do the same thing? And so why are we opening the door for all of this nonsense to come in? And city council doesn't have to hear it, because when they hear our recommendations, those items take, I believe, about 2 minutes. They hear them all as a group and they approve what we've done, but they don't sit through the 50, 60 people that come in from Mines Road because they're pissed that the property next door to a school was changed to an M1 way back in 1995 and nobody knew about it because nobody was within 200 feet. And so all we're doing is opening the door for that sort of stuff to come up again.
I appreciate your concerns.
And
Let
so,
me address them.
And so that's why, and we're bringing this up now when I think everybody's been abundantly clear where this is being brought again and again and again without any research, any further research. And it's, we're quibbling, we're fighting over back and forth about how it's going to be presented. When, instead of talking about in theory, let's come up with specific solutions on how we do it. And I think we've all given, not although through you, but if you want to go 0 setbacks, do it with new subdivisions. Let's start it there. Or do it in the areas that already have it where there is no zoning. There's parts downtown, West Laredo, near South Central Laredo that have no setbacks already. Play with the zoning there. But going into existing neighborhoods that were platted, that came in through the whole planning process and allowing them to change it, that's kind of nonsensical. And it flies in the face of, you knew what you were getting into when you bought that lot. And if you don't like it, you can sell your property and buy another piece of property.
If I can, let me finish the detail on this, what I brought, because I think it'll answer some of the concerns that you have right now.
Sorry,
Just a minute.
I want to hear.
Just a minute. Commissioner Ugarte has a
I
question.
I just have.
I don't have a comment, I just have a question.
I'll let you go first. Go ahead.
What I wanted to know is, can you all pull up the comp plan here so we can look at the goals on housing? Because I think that's important. We need to look at the housing goals in the comp plan.
Yes, we can. We can stay here as long as you want to go over this in depth. I would actually, as a city planner, I'd love that. But would you please allow me to finish my presentation on this, just so that you understand where I'm coming from?
Okay. Go right ahead.
Thank you. Because one of the key requirements that I'm going to submit with this zone is that a majority of residents, demonstrated by signatures with addresses, show that they're in favor of this. That is a very stiff requirement. So it would not be, we just notice it and we don't, 5 people come and some say they like it, some say they don't. If the neighborhood wants to apply for an RSO zone, then they have to demonstrate that a majority of property owners in that neighborhood are on board with this change. Now, just applying to new development, you said, why can't we just let it apply to new development? We already have a zoning in place for new development to have 5-foot setbacks. That's called our PUD zone. We have some subdivisions in the city that have been built that way. So This is not intended for new development. We have a tool already in place for new development to build in smaller setbacks. I don't know if you're aware of that. It's the PUD zone. Some developers may not like that because our requirements are a little stiffer, but this is not intended for new development. It will not be used for new development. This is for existing development where perhaps you have a neighborhood where reducing the setbacks would not cause a significant problem and where a majority of the property owners would appreciate that. Shouldn't there be some allowance for them to change it? I think that's fair, and that would be this reduced setback overlay zone. So, to finish it up, the allowance, you can't read this, but let me see if I can zoom in. The allowance would be the same. Well, basically, it's pretty simple. It's 5-foot setbacks on the side setbacks and the rear setback. On the front, it's 10, except for carports, right? They can go. Yeah, driveway has to go further than 10 because you still have to have 20 feet for driveway. But it's basically the same that you've seen before with the citywide change, except it's only applied for this overlay zone. So it's 5 feet on the side, 5 feet in the rear, and 10 in the front. Additionally, there are requirements that it has to go through the normal process. I mean, that's normal. You're rezoning. You have to go through the normal zoning process. And then in addition, 50%, more than 50%, greater than 50% of the property owners will have to demonstrate by signature and address that they're in favor of this. So those will have to be collected to show that they support this. And they would bring that in to the Planning Commission to review, to examine. And also the Planning Commission would look at the neighborhood, and there would be some guidance. It wouldn't be hard rules in this ordinance, but there would be guidance as where there may be concerns, certain neighborhoods where there are already issues with parking off street, and where there are issues with road width. There'd be some guidance. So, in other words, neighborhoods would come, and there'd be restrictions on, you couldn't do this for one home. This would be a neighborhood at a time that could be applied to zoning, perhaps a minimum of 30 feet. I'm still working that out with our city attorney. 30 homes. So there would be a restriction on the minimum. So one person couldn't come, you wouldn't be inundated with 100 of these requests. No, it would have to be a whole neighborhood at a time coming in, asking for this and demonstrating that this is the majority of the neighborhood that wants this. And that doesn't mean they get it. They come before the commission makes a determination or recommendation, then it goes to council to do the same, make a determination or recommendation. So that is what I'm proposing with reduced setback.
Let me ask you a quick question before we go on. Let's assume that you bring a request to this board on this. Will an analysis have already been done on stormwater runoff, utilities, fire, all these areas that to me are of great concern? Will that be done before we get the item before us?
Yes, when a neighborhood would come in, then that's something as staff that we would look at, and there will be neighborhoods where our staff recommendation would be, no, a reduced setback overlay zone in this area.
I think he was asking as far as what your proposals are going to be. Are you going to do all those analyses before you?
No, we don't need to. With a citywide option, if we were going to go citywide, we really need to because we're changing the whole city at once. With this, with approving, all we would be approving at this step is just the ability to have an RSO zone. Then a neighborhood would have to apply for it. And when they do, then we can examine that neighborhood at a time.
That's my
and say,
question.
Yes, in this situation as staff, we feel comfortable, given the street widths, given the hazards,
Capacity of water and sewer.
given stormwater, capacity of water.
Stormwater
This
retention,
neighborhood-
because every subdivision is based on calculations of stormwater runoff. The minute we have less impervious cover, obviously you got more stormwater runoff.
Right.
Creates flooding issues like we've had in certain parts of the city.
Today.
And so, those are just questions that come to my mind before I would feel comfortable
Doing this a
overlays.
neighborhood at a time allows us as staff to do that analysis
Yeah,
and give you a
okay.
recommendation.
Hold on, yeah, I got a comment, but I think this is coming from because the council is they're gonna make a decision on this, like, they wanna make a decision now, right? They want us to approve a blanket cover of setback ordinance, which we're against, and it just doesn't make sense to do that, right? So the option that you're presenting, we're still risking that they vote on the option one, right? It would send it off.
Whether or not I propose an option 2, they will eventually
Right.
get option 1 and vote on it. What I was hoping to do was to explain to them that option 1 puts the city at great risk, and we haven't done the analysis. So let me give you an option 2 that is much smaller in scale and allows us a proper time for
Right,
analysis.
so if I understand this correctly, option 2 would give you the option to overlay certain areas, maybe not neighborhoods, because maybe it's hard to differentiate between neighborhoods, so it would be more like a designated area.
It'd be a cluster of homes at a time.
So-
in the scale of a neighborhood at a time.
For new construction or for new developments, would that be an option for developers to come in during the master plan process and say, I'm gonna designate this area under this overlay zone and give it 5-foot setbacks?
We already have that in place.
That's already there.
We have a PUD.
The thing is, that's why I asked them, is it only for, that's why I asked you if it was for new development or not, and you said it was for both, but the reality is there's already one. This is only for existing houses.
Exactly.
So the correct answer would have been telling me from the beginning, it was only for existing houses, not for new developments. That's what they're going at. But the thing is, he's bringing forth an option 2 with no finite parameters for what option 2 is. It's just in theory that maybe a neighborhood, maybe
But I
defined
think
as
this
30.
exists already. I think these setback overlays exist somewhere. Other cities have something similar to this, or?
Probably, but
Well, yeah.
Well,
Yes, there
somewhere
are
else, but
overlay
different.
zones which both reduce setbacks and increase them.
But not here.
But, okay, so whether we decide to recommend in favor or not, I think the council's gonna make a decision. And we don't want them to make the wrong
Well-
decision, right?
Well, the reality, logistically speaking, they can make a decision if we make a recommendation. If we table it, they can.
I would.
But the thing is, the only thing we've made a decision on was option 1, which was the citywide one.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
it.
and so, but
If
we're
you
not even
table this,
presenting.
you're only giving them the citywide option. I
Yeah.
would not recommend.
So
that.
that.
But the thing is, the hard part is, you're giving us option 2 without any real parameters as far as what defines a neighborhood.
Well, I think what we can do is, we can discuss the definition of defining parameters right now, right?
I came here
Because
not
this
to
is-
tell
this
you.
is-
Yeah, I came here to get your
But he's
input.
making his presentation as to what option 2 is. We still have the authority here to say, okay, let's define this a little bit further. And we can make suggestions that
Right.
he would take forth as, if we decide to say, hey, option 2 is something we want to do, but the parameters are this, define the area in terms of how many units you would encompass. Then define another thing. He's talking about majority. In most HOAs, you're looking at 75% to make sure those things go forward. Those are parameters we can look at.
No, and that's fine and dandy, but the problem is, we had an agenda where it mentions very briefly what an RSO is.
Yeah.
We had page 1
that's right.
that says one
Yeah.
page of what it is. It would have been nice, even though we get it on Tuesday, it would have been nice to get this little slideshow and some background materials ahead of time so we can look at it on our own, instead of finding out about it at 5:45 or 5:50 and hearing a little bit about it right now and finding out about it now, where I like to look it up myself.
So when
I'd
does
like
city
to
council
find
meet
out.
again? They meet next month?
Let me just have Carlos Flores.
All right, so
Carlos, can I quickly just respond to that?
yeah.
This is time sensitive because if we did not bring another
They're gonna go
option to
with
city
one.
council,
They're gonna go with one.
it's
They're gonna go
very
with one.
likely that they would adopt citywide change. And I
That-
wanted-
I understand that, but the thing is, those city
So
council
that-
met
So
on
I'm not
Monday.
rushing it. This is not the normal way. We will give you plenty of time in advance, but we're working on this with the city attorney to do some of the details. I wanted to get your input, but it's time sensitive to get the council another option that makes more sense so they can weigh both like the proper one. So I apologize that you didn't have enough time.
No, well, but Mr. Snyderman, the point I'm trying to make is, we all have telephones, we all have the ability for you to contact us individually and talk to us individually and just say, look, this is what I'd like to do, or this is some ideas I have, but I've known everybody here enough that everybody looks up and does their own research on who they speak to, or gets different input, not just getting it today and figuring it out. I understand that it's important, and I understand that city council has an urgency to do this, because they've been pushing it back at us every meeting for the
At
past
least
2
there's only one
months.
district is pushing.
I'm not gonna get into that part, I'm just saying it's been brought back to us every
That is
meeting.
noted, and in the future, I'll make sure I reach out.
Let me
to-
recognize Commissioner Beckman.
But, Mr. Stidman, honestly, I can't, I don't want to vote on anything that I find out about the day at the meeting. It's disrespectful. I'm not saying you did it on purpose. It's really just unacceptable, especially something that's this insignificant to the entire commission. We need materials in advance. We need, at the minimum, this morning at 8 a.m. they could have been delivered. Maybe they can't. I don't know. It shouldn't be on the agenda. We're not going to get them because it's being forced. You're educating us in the live meeting about something. That's not okay. It isn't. Similarly, the reason I asked you how long ago did you realize that you were going to bring this RSO thing to us to discuss, and if it was last week, and we could have contacted the chairman and had a workshop on it. This is how important it is for us to be able to make votes that are intelligent and well thought out. I understand you're under pressure, but I don't want to be under pressure to make a vote on something that we don't fully understand. It's exactly what Commissioner Tejas is telling you.
Let me interject something here. Correct me if I'm wrong. The city council meeting is on the 16th, the next one. Is that correct? The first and third.
16th.
The last day that you have to turn in materials to post, the agenda gets posted on the Wednesday.
Changes to the ordinance require 16 days of notice, so the soonest that they could vote on either option, because it hasn't been noticed yet, will be the October.
The first meeting in October.
Great.
All right, so given that, and that's where I was coming from, we have a little bit of time here to define some things before you have to, for this commission, has to make a recommendation that goes forth on the first meeting of October. Given that we have that time, my recommendation to you, listening to all these commissioners, is that we need to have a workshop ASAP. You finish up parameters, details of this, and we'll be willing to meet with you. Because I believe what everybody's saying here is, I don't have enough information yet. We're kind of like rushing through this thing. You yourself haven't finished, I think, in your mind and your thought process, processing all the ramifications, defining the sizes, defining a couple of things.
Well, the new development and
And I
existing
think
development.
this buys a little bit of time to help us make some kind of an intelligent recommendation. We're willing to work with you at, scheduling a meeting as a workshop. A one item workshop, which would be strictly this. I'm sorry?
I've been waiting to speak for 20 minutes, everyone keeps interrupting.
All right, go ahead.
I've only been here for 20
Well, I mean, I'm not
minutes.
gonna just jump in, I mean, I'm waiting.
I'm gonna recognize you right now.
Okay, first of all, I guess really, Kirby, my question to you is, how is this tied to the comp plan? Like, in other words, what is the housing goal that this is going to achieve? Okay, that's what I want to know, whether it's Plan 1 or Plan 2 or Plan 3 or Plan 4. We spend all this money on a comp plan, and I don't know what the vision is of how this is going to move that forward. And that's why I didn't want to vote on this last time, because it's very clear that the direction that your department is getting is trying to rush something that isn't well thought out. And now I appreciate your attempt to give us an alternative that is going to slow down the process of all of this. And I understand you're doing that. I also understand the other commissioners' frustration about like getting this sooner, and so I get that. But now we're here, and so what I want to know is, how does this move the comp plan forward? Like, what is the vision in the comp plan regarding housing that this directly speaks to? And second of all, this is why I had wanted us to have a city ordinance on neighborhood associations, which this commission approved probably about a year ago and is died at city council and never come back to my knowledge. Because how are communities to be able to make decisions about what's going to affect them if they have no organized structure where they can meet, they can talk, they can push these issues through? So like, if we're going to make these decisions, whether it be Plan 1 or Plan 2, we need those neighborhood associations. And so and then the third thing is, I think that we need to have the comp plan on, like when we come to our planning and zoning meetings, the comp plan needs to be on this screen. So that when you're saying this applies with the comp plan, we can go to the section and we can review it and we can talk about it meaningfully while we are here. So my question to you is, whether it's Plan 1 or Plan 2, what is the purpose of this? How is this going to help move the vision of the comp plan, one, and two, how is this gonna benefit our citizens? Both, I'm not talking about an individual citizen, I'm talking about a neighborhood, I'm talking about property values, I'm talking about the resellability of homes, I'm talking about the attractiveness of a neighborhood to live in it. How does this help any of that? Plan one or plan two? That's my
Let me
question.
ask you a quick, that's a good question, but let me ask this. The comp plan that we have right now, normally a comp plan has several elements of it. One is a housing plan, which is not in this plan.
No, this
Another
is a
one is an
housing plan.
economic plan, which is not in this plan. Transportation, which we have somewhat. There's about 5 different components of a comprehensive plan. They're not really on this plan. This plan is mostly a general idea, but it doesn't have a specific plan, which are all plans that have to be created on this plan. So to answer Commissioner Flores' question, there is no housing plan in the comp plan.
Well,
It's a
that's
general
my-
idea.
Yeah, well.
There has to
Can
be-
you go to the goals of the housing part of
Yes,
this?
and to answer your question in general, well, first of all, a comprehensive plan is comprehensive in that it touches all aspects of the city. It's not comprehensive in that it
Has
does level of detail on everything. So it does have goals on all the things that you talked about, which we're going to go look at right now. In general, those are here. I brought those to you. What you just said, I'm referring to the comp plan, that it does call for denser development. It does call for more sustainable development, and it looks at using our land more effectively and allows citizens to be more creative with their housing.
Just for clarification, hold on, let me
We're gonna
interrupt
go.
real quick. The details that you want?
I don't want details.
Okay,
I don't want details. It has goals. I want to see the goals.
Okay, those goals, the comprehensive plan, will come to us when each
I just wanna see
section,
the goals.
when overlay section comes for planning and
I
zoning.
wanna see the
That's what
goals.
we're gonna, see, all he needs to do is put parameters in place,
I just want to see the goals.
rules so that people can follow
I
when it
want to
comes
see
to
the goals.
commission.
Because the only goal.
Then we look
there-
at economic
One of the,
impact.
then
Then we
just
look at
because
social
the
impact.
goal says density doesn't mean that there aren't other goals that it has to
But
be.
you're asking him to do something,
take
take
into
him out.
account.
All right, guys, all right, hold on, all right. Let me just have you guys one at a time.
I'd like to see the housing goals at the end of the chapter.
Well, I would ask we deal with this later, because we're spinning our wheels here.
I agree.
Because the only part I disagree with is, going back on what Commissioner Beckelheimer said, is whenever we have an issue, whatever issue it is, if it is important enough to one side or the other, they all have our phone numbers, they all have our email addresses, because when, for example, the La Bota issue came forward, I got a phone call from one side and I got a phone call from the residents. So did everybody else on this commission. There is nothing wrong with staff calling us individually and saying, look, Mr. Lugo, I'd love to sit down and talk to you for half an hour about option 2 before we go to the meeting. There's nothing illegal, unethical, or wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with a developer calling, hey, I saw how you voted the last time on this type of issue, Mr. Lugo or Mr. Tellez. I'd like to sit down and talk to you about why these comments aren't necessarily appropriate with our master plan, instead of bringing this up to us at this moment. And so that's why I don't think it's appropriate that we even vote on it and just bring us what it is
I think,
we want.
Commissioner, I think we're going round and round in circles. I think what we need to do here is, we really, the direction we need to give Kirby here, if the meeting is going to be the first meeting of October, we have time to address a workshop with a little bit more clarity in terms of parameters.
Well, I cannot schedule this for city council without a recommendation. from
I agree
the
with you, but like I
So what
said,
they have now is a recommendation on the citywide option. So by delaying this, what you're requiring me to do is to bring them that item without an option 2.
no, Mr. John, hold on,
No,
just a minute, hold on, guys, just a minute. The question I asked you was, when would this have to go forth? You just told me the first meeting in October.
That's the soonest, if you sent a recommendation today
Right.
on this, that's the soonest both could go.
Right, but what I'm saying to you right now is, that paperwork doesn't have to be in until
10 days from now.
let's see, if that meeting is October the 1st, that agenda gets posted on the 25th of September.
Sorry, Carlos, it's not pulling up.
It's on the 25th of September. So what I'm saying to you right now is today's the 5th. We have,
Let's do it next week. Let's just do it next week.
I agree.
Gives you
I mean,
time.
let's just do it
And
next
and
week.
Post it so that we can
Give
vote on
you
it at
as
that
much-
time with a recommendation.
you know, if we do it, let's say next week, anytime that we can all agree on
Let's do it next
schedule,
Thursday.
it gives you some time to come up with, you know, whatever parameters we need and details of this thing so that everybody has a clear understanding.
Can I make a comment?
Go right ahead.
I think it's important to this discussion, okay? Kirby, here's what, if I was a city councilman, if I was the planning department, and I was addressing, and I was tackling this issue, okay? Here's what I would say. This would be the approach I would take. I would say, look, you know what? We took a look at this neighborhood, okay? It's got some of the characteristics of something that would benefit from setbacks being shorter, okay? This is why, okay? And so what we want to do is these are the reasons why. This is how it's going to benefit. It's in line with what the goals are for the comp plan, or the housing section of the comp plan, okay? Or it's a trend in other cities that has been successful in doing some economic development thing, or some spurring new economic or housing development in a particular area, whatever the particular goal is. And this is where we want to do the overlay. And this is why, and we're going to measure its success in this way, year 1, year 2, year 3, and then we'll come back and we'll know whether it was a success or not, and then we can duplicate it in another part of the city. That's the kind of vision, leadership, idea that is the kind of thing that would justify what we're being asked to recommend. You see what I mean? As opposed to, I plan 1, which is a terrible idea, and plan 2, which seems like an undeveloped idea, to be quite honest. And so, I don't know if you all agree with that type of vision, but I think that's the kind of thing we're looking for. At least that's the thing I'm looking for. Like, here's the plan, man. This is why we need it. This is why it's going to work. This is the goal of it. You know, and this is how we're going to do it. And this is the time frame. And this is the way we're going to measure whether it's successful or not.
Well, undeveloped or not, is still a better idea than option 1.
Oh, yeah. Option 2 is better than option 1. Absolutely. I mean, I think everyone feels that already. But the thing is, you know, option 2 needs to be more developed. And I think that we can help you to do that.
So once the council approves option 2, then they vote on it, there's still time to develop the ordinance, or is there still, like, no, that's it?
Once an ordinance is approved, whatever you put forward, that's it.
You gotta have
Okay, well,
you gotta have everything.
We're clear on the
in.
plans.
You
I think
gotta
we're
have
all
it
clear on what we want to do
Agreed
here.
that
Let's- let me-
another
yeah,
workshop
let's-
would be helpful. Let's talk about timing in just a second, but just so you understand the process that I'm trying to accomplish here. This, I know the frustration because you've been working on this for a while. Council's frustrated as well, or some council members are frustrated for the same reason. So I came in the middle of this, and I see a citywide option coming to the city. At first I thought, oh, there's, you know, this is not going to be considered. And then after learning some things, I thought, okay, maybe it will. So we need a second option where the scale is much smaller. Now, you say it's undeveloped. It is basically the same option. You've seen it before. You said you've seen it 4 times before. It is the same thing. We're reducing setbacks the same way. The only difference is, instead of being applying citywide, we're only applying it in an overlay zone to a smaller area. And it doesn't need to, we don't need to spend 10 hours on this. There are a few parameters that we can look at, and before writing that down and bringing it to you, I thought, let me get your input and we'll send a recommendation, because basically it's the same thing. It's the same setbacks that you've seen 4 times before, except only applied to a smaller area. The only thing left to decide is, what's the area, the minimum that we could apply it to, and would there be any restriction requiring a signature of property owners? That's it.
And who
So as
decides
far as
who
undeveloped,
qualifies? Who decides who qualifies if the area?
Planning Commission and City Council, as with any zoning
But
decision.
that would be after the ordinance, that's what he's saying, it's gonna
That would
come
be
back to us, so we could look at that in detail.
So I understand the frustration, but really this is simple. It's what you've looked at 4 times before, except we're applying it to a smaller area. We're only creating the option. The option then has to be exercised later, which then Planning Commission and Council review. Now, I've heard what you said. You want to come back for a work session. We can do that on a Wednesday.
Yeah.
And then
I
get your
can't on
recommendation.
Wednesday, I have class.
Just poll us, please.
Don't go to class.
Yes.
I teach at 10.
Well, we'd have to, let's look at it right now. Everybody,
I
Thursday,
can only on Tuesdays and Thursdays, or Fridays.
Tuesdays are fine.
what is the latest that y'all,
Lunch?
could you do 7?
Yes. On what day?
I can either day, Thursday or, well, Tuesday would be better, but.
Let's do, can you do Tuesday?
I can't do Tuesday, I have a meeting
How about
at 6
Thursday? How about Thursday? 7 p.m. on Thursday?
I'm okay with Thursday.
Also Wednesday, if that
I
works.
teach
Tuesday,
till
Thursday.
9:10.
Mr. Steinman, there really isn't any problem with you polling us tomorrow. so everybody can see their agendas and see what they have to do.
Okay, I'll send an email out. Everybody give me their feedback. I'll give you a few options.
Yes,
Six
It's not a
options,
big
guys.
deal. At lunch also, maybe people want to do a lunch meeting, I mean,
We can do that too.
yeah.
I like that, yeah, we could do that. I like that this planning commission is animated, got some passion. For those watching, they may not know that a few of y'all are friends, so you like to really go at it. I appreciate that very much. I like the lively discussion.
I'm not his friend.
Whatever gives you that notion.
But what I'm hoping you gather from this, what I'm hoping you don't go away with is, I want you to be able to trust staff here, okay? No one is pressuring me to do anything. I'm trying to bring the best options to the city council so they can make a good decision. And I want you to be able to trust me. And then that goes both ways. So Commissioner Tellez, yes, I as soon as I knew about this idea, I probably should have called each of y'all individually to get your input. So for the future, noted, I will do that. Even if I don't have something totally prepared, I'll reach out to you and get your take on it beforehand. So that was good feedback. And we'll take another work session to work this out and get a recommendation. We'll have to notice for it, which is fine. And then we'll get your recommendation and we can get it in time in October to send it to council and let them make a decision with those two options.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So what was the date?
So they're gonna table it and well, you need to.
Make a motion.
Yeah, you need to make a motion.
Well,
Make a
hold
motion
on.
to
Before we
table
make
the-
the motion, just a second. I think it would be a lot easier if we could all sort of, do y'all think we can come up with a date right now? Is Thursday good for you guys?
Yeah.
Is 8, is that too late?
Or do you, I mean, and I'm talking here,
So late.
is a luncheon meeting better than an evening meeting, or do y'all need to do some cross-checking on your
It's
calendars or
hard.
what?
For me during the day, it's hard just
Are
because
we?
my, I might have an emergency at work. And for me during the day, it's very hard.
Okay.
If I have
So
7 p.m. on
an
Thursday?
evening meeting is better.
Yeah.
PM?
7 p.m. on Thursday?
For this next Thursday, the 12th?
Thursday the 12th.
Yeah, for 7 works for me.
7?
7.
7?
That's perfect.
I mean, I'm
You're
going
gonna
to
need
say
to check.
yes, but I can't tell you till tomorrow,
Okay.
yeah.
Joey?
Can you still poll us tomorrow?
Yes.
That's why I was asking to table it so I can look and make sure.
Okay, well, we'll get the
I'll send
poll
an email
tomorrow.
tomorrow.
We'll
It's all right.
We'll get the poll tomorrow then to confirm who can attend. Let's tentatively set it for Thursday, the 12th at 7 o'clock.
And at the workshop, we could do a motion, right, to send a
That's
recommendation?
correct. That's the way it's
It'll
gonna be.
a quorum,
Yeah.
and it'll be a
Okay.
public meeting.
Yeah, okay?
So you're going to make it a special call meeting?
Yes,
Special
Workshop
meeting.
with special call meeting, is that what this is
Yes.
then?
Yes.
Okay.
because we already
It's
have
just a
to make
special
a
meeting.
recommendation one way or the other. Okay, so it'll be a special meeting. All right, okay.
I think there's two motions here. One is to table the item, the second is to call a special meeting on.
Well, I
Well, it
think,
has to get tabled, period. But it's
Has to get
tabled to
tabled.
the special
And then the second
meeting.
motion would be to.
You can make
The
it
chairman
public.
can call a special meeting on your own, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, you can always.
yeah, we do, and that's what I'm saying. I'm recommending that if feasible, a special meeting be held on Thursday, the 12th, at 7 o'clock at night. Or do y'all need it, or do y'all want it at 6?
No, he's saying 7.
I have the historic board that same night. It starts at 6, but I think we'll be finished, starts at 5:30, but we should be finished by 7.
All right, 7 o'clock. All right, that's my tentative, it's a tentative date based on the polling of the commission. And if the majority of the commission can attend that, then that's fine. If not, we'll seek an alternative date where the majority, I would really like to see
Yeah, we can-
100%
I'll be there.
participation if possible. I agree with all your comments that this is a very critical item. We're asked to, do something with, and I think it would behoove us to have all commission members present.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Pettis, you want to finish your motion?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Make a motion to table to time certain at a special hearing next week.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion carries. Thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
Just a minute.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Just a minute. We have one last thing. The director's comments. Any comments?
Yes, I just want to say thank you again for your service. You don't get paid to do this. You come in on your own time away from your families and friends. And I really appreciate it. And also, let me say again, I appreciate the lively feedback. I appreciate the feedback for staff. We want to do a better job and improve. So whenever you have that, please give it to us. Thank you very much.
Okay, now, motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all very much.
Yeah, I gotta retype
That's true.
No, they gave you a free one. They gave you a free one.
I was here a little late, but I was gonna.